Welcome to the Jones Zone, a podcast by Darryl and JJ Jones.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Jones Zone. Today, we are blessed with the presence of Leslie Waterman with Puro Clean in the city of Tustin. She owns it with her husband. It's a water remediation company. Leslie, tell us what it is that you do.
Puro Clean in North Tustin, we are restoration remediation services. We handle property emergencies, so everything with fire, smoke, water, and mold. The highlight of what we take a look and do is usually we'll talk to property owners, either commercial or residential, that have experienced some type of intrusion of water. And it just does a cascade of, damages and kind of how to deal with the damages and then recovers. We do a lot of triage, I guess you would say, on properties.
And the thing about water leaks is it's not something that is going to get better with time. Well, first of all, they probably don't notice it right away. Is that fair to say?
Fair to say.
Good. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about where it's at. I'm sorry, you're saying?
What I like to tell people, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen to a property. Water intrusion happens in so many different facets. Some are way more obvious than others, and others take a little bit of a fine-tuned looking, but all can definitely be costly.
I was talking with a friend of mine who was somehow related in the business years and years and years ago, and he brought up a good point about how when you see the evidence of a water leak, oftentimes the actual leak is 20 feet away.
It can be. Water is a beautiful, beautiful creature in itself. And I call it the unstoppable force, because when you really look at water, you're not looking at something that's really going to stop it unless it's being extracted, pulled out, soaked up. All it does is if it hits one wall or a corner, it just keeps moving and it'll just keep turning. Water can actually get aspirated up into drywall. So while you think it's on the floor and that's all you have to worry about, it could go up 4, 6 feet into your drywall, to your doors, your fabric. So water is an unstoppable force unless it is forced to stop.
Kind of like a sponge, the drywall.
Drywall is definitely a sponge.
So our listeners are homeowners and they want to know how to prevent this or how to remedy it, etc. And hopefully there's an answer to this question. I'm sure there's a top 3, but where are the most common water leaks found?
I'm going to give you the top 4. And the top 4 are the ones that I always tell any homeowner to take a look out for. The top 2 are in the same area. It's your kitchen, you have your dishwasher, and your refrigerator. 9 times out of 10, when you're looking at your appliances, are not understanding is there a constant feed of water that's going through their supply lines. And our water, no matter how great water we have, they're just different backups into it.
On that note, are there different types of water that tend to leak more? You said there were different types of water.
There are types of different water in regards to where your sources are coming from. Is it the Colorado River? Is it this reservoir? Is it that reservoir? And you're going to have in some higher forms of chlorine and sediment in that type of situation. Now, our water supply is actually coming through a filtrated source, yes, but does it take out 100% of all the sediment? No. You hear a lot of plumbers say you've got hard water, or you have a calcium buildup, or, all of this information. And that's completely true. It's because the water coming from the sources coming through our pipes is not absolutely pure. Now, some do put in water filtration systems that go throughout the whole house, but the supply line is still coming in with that water. So sediment is still coming in somewhere and it can get backed up. Just like your refrigerator, your supply line there, calcium can build up there, and your dishwasher. I'm not one of those moms that has a whole lot of time on my hands where I can pull out my refrigerator and clean it every 2 weeks and check the supply line. I could tell you I probably do it maybe once a year, pulling it out and seeing what toys are back there, grime and gook, and clean it out. But how often do you think someone really does that?
Are there better types of water than others? Are most leaks based on the fact that there's buildup of calcium or et cetera, things like that?
Yes. So when you're looking at your appliances, that is one of the number 1 reasons for the actual supply line or the line to leak is there's a buildup of sediment or a calcium there. And it creates like a pressure, and then the tubing can crack. And then, basically you're having a very small trickle of water behind a very large appliance. So you do not see this water coming in. And the pool may be evaporated by the machine running. You know how some refrigerators can get hot. It's going to evaporate. And you're thinking, well, if it evaporates that quickly, what damage can really be done? It comes down and goes away. Well, it's not instant. And the reason that I tell anybody is that the longer that water sits in any area is the possible of contamination and damage. The more water will sit on wood, you're going to look at warping, you're going to see different discolorations. Drywall is the same way, and everyone has baseboards. Everyone loves that mold look, molding, not mold. But you're looking at creating a perfect atmosphere, constant moisture, plus heat and movement with the refrigerators or the dishwashers, and then this like encapsulation. And when you move that refrigerator, maybe in 3 years, because now you have to replace it, you're going to now notice that you have a big staining of mold.
In order for someone to also diagnose if it is mold indeed, because aren't there other things that grow? Mildew, I'm thinking of the word mildew. There's other things that grow. In fact, could you talk to that about not only mold that grows, but other things?
Yep, mold and mildew definitely grow. And those are your main two contaminants. But when you're looking at both, you have different families of both. Now, mold, you're around it 24/7. Okay, you're exposed to this even walking down the street in the fertilizers, plant beds, trees. Mold is everywhere. And 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have a huge reaction to mold. Mildew is the same way. All it is a name for a type of bacterial growth that is coming out of your structure or the bedding. So you're looking at the floor, the tile, the drywall, the grout, all will have some type of growth. What I like to tell people is a good remediation company that's coming out and talking to you and taking a look at, hey, there's a stain on the back of my, and I think it's mold. Unless they are sitting there and they are a lab technician and taking a swab, we're going to call it microgrowth. We are not going to give it that title as mold. And the reason that we're doing that is mold cannot actually be confirmed unless it's under an actual breakdown from a lab. So that's usually sometimes what we tell homeowners is like, hey, we're going to have, you have microgrowth. We suspect that it is the mold and we want to go ahead and do a remediation. And the reason is I'm not a lab and I don't bring my lab guys out unless, you know, that, hey, insurance requires it or anything like that, because it can get a little costly to run all the tests. We do use our best judgments on how to remediate and we follow protocols that are set up by our certifications and, you know, in-depth training. But how we look at it is I'm not going to sit here and give you a classification on just an inspection.
Yeah, it's got to go to a lab. I mean, hey, I've had clients say, hey, that looks like mold. And I said, well, have you had it tested in a lab? I said, well, no. I said, well, we don't know if it's mold. It's literally impossible to know if it's mold. And then, okay, so you mentioned about the most likely places where water intrusion or leaks are, the kitchen being one, other appliances. In fact, I'm reminded about, you know, when people move, they oftentimes, of course, will take their washer and dryer and that little hose there. I learned this early in my career when I tell them, when you move your washing machine, go get a big white bucket or some sort of bucket or a clamp on that hose, because even though you may not think it's dripping, it oftentimes even one drop every 30 seconds. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, you got yourself a problem. So put that hose in a bucket. What other places are really common for water intrusion?
I always have people take a look. You have your automatic, you have your showers and your toilets, making sure that, you know, your caulking is good, your wax seals on your toilets.
So when you say looking good, you literally maybe you go down, and let's say someone that wants to do this for themselves. You just go down and it's as simple as looking for moisture with your index finger around the bottom of the toilet. Tell us a little bit more about that. Is it?
One of your big indicators that your wax ring is going to start going out is your toilet starts to move. When you're starting to feel a little bit of a shake or you're hearing something, you know, moving as you're getting up and off the toilet, it is definitely a good time to like, hey, have a plumber come out, take a look at it. Or if you feel, hey, you're comfortable with doing that wax ring, some people feel very, very handy, can do it themselves. Take a look at that.
I think this is something that's fair to say. I'm sure there are many people who can do their own, but boy, it's kind of like heart surgery, or you probably want to get someone that knows what they're doing. I've even had people that know what they're doing improperly install wax rings where they had to come back out and do it. The point is, it's you know, it's like
Leave
a
it
lot
to
of
the professional.
Yeah.
No. And I are dealing with in water restoration are the homeowners that try to take on a project themselves to save a little bit of money. And the project got a little too big, or they weren't expecting this. Now they're kind of in a stuck or a hard spot. I'm giving you what to look out for, but if you have your local plumber that you are very comfortable with, give them a call, tell them, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, and they're going to come out and help you out. Make sure you're definitely dealing with the right licensed and certified technicians. I can't emphasize that enough.
Would a plumber know if you called them, let's say every once a year, something like that, where you have a standard inspection done throughout the house. Is that something that's common for plumbers to do?
No. And the reason I say the plumbers really don't do like a home inspection is to come out to you. There's usually a service charge. There's usually a need for a plumber to come out. They don't just like, oh, hey, let's take a look and make sure everything's good for you or golden. So that's why, in certain apartment complexes or even individual homes, they'll have a property manager who constantly walks the property, takes a look at things, does their own inspections and says, hey, that's a little bit suspicious. Let's call somebody in, the maintenance guy or the professional to take a look. So homeowners who purchase their own homes or even renters on your everyday life, it's really your ownership, your responsibility to do this. So there's a little bit of a checklist that we have here in our home is we do servicing pretty regular. We do the appliance servicing where the supply lines are checked for the dishwasher, refrigerator, our washing machine, and our dryer to make sure our vents are cleared. Also, our HVAC machine and furnace. We want to make sure that our air conditioner, the condenser line, is also free of water. You have a pan sometimes that's up there with your HVAC systems, not all HVAC systems, but it helps to collect the water. Now, if you've gone through a heat wave here in Southern California, you know that sometimes you run those ACs 24/7. And those pans only have a certain amount of a capability of holding water. If your condenser line is clogged up on your AC unit, then what's going to happen is it's going to drip down into that pan. But once that pan is full, it's going to leak then everywhere. I live in the Santa Ana, Tustin area, so our furnace area is actually within our attic above our ceiling. Our condenser line completely got clogged because of how often we were running our AC and the pan overflowed and we saw water damage on our ceiling. We saw a staining start. Back traced it to the source of the water. It was there, had the service done. We cleaned up the mess. Thank gosh, we're the trained professionals to do so. And we were able to hit it. The water overflowing from the pan lasted maybe 6 hours because it was overnight. And that's what I noticed a lot of our homeowners experiences. They went to bed the night before and everything was fine. And then they woke up this morning and now they don't know where this is coming from. And we have to play a little bit of a inspector game and being able to investigate what's going on or how things are changed in the environment to see the source.
Yeah, central air water condensation lines seem to be,
Mhm.
I know I've had a few clients that was what caused it. So that's a kind of a common cause, would you say?
Definitely. We probably, towards this last summer, we probably got almost roughly about 12 calls, all with ceiling damage due to condensation lines being clogged or overflowed. The unit itself was just working to the point where it was creating too much condensation, water damage happened. It also happens with the window mounted units where then you have the exhaust fan that's going out, you have your supply line. What we a lot of times see is if that's been running continuous day and night, the drywall below the window unit, because of the constant, just steady drip comes through, the drywall's been affected and people don't see that the drywall's wet because it doesn't do an automatic staining with paint. They saw it because at the floor, there started to have a little bit of a pool or there was a little bit of a warping with their linoleum or something like that. And then go in and take a moisture meter and took a look at the window. And yeah, the condensation from that AC unit was the reason. Those are one of the bigger culprits that we take a look at are the AC units, appliances in general, things that are supposed to make our environment a little bit easier and more comfortable. They need to be serviced. They need to have attention to them. They shouldn't just be turned on and just ran. Like you want to make sure that you're not creating a damage just by being comfortable.
You mentioned previously about washing machines. So I'm looking at a washing machine, let's say in my kitchen, I'm thinking, okay, where do I look? Do you have to pull it out? How does that look like?
You do.
Okay.
You do. Just like the washer, the refrigerator, and your dishwasher. These are appliances that usually, once they get installed, then a technician will push them back towards the wall or within the cupboard. So running it, you're not seeing anything on the back end of the components. In order to take a look at that, you gently do have to pull out the appliance and be able to check the actual connection ring to the appliance and then also the connection to your water source, your spigot, and then the line itself. So there's almost like 3 points of contact. And where it could fail is any of those three or all. That's why I say sometimes you want to let a professional take a look at the appliance. There's appliance service people that come out. They do that type of service where they do the inspection, and if needed, they can help change out the supply lines and everything. I recommend saying that doing this particular service maybe once a year and having all of your appliances pulled out and checked, because they know that, what's the common length of your supply line, not to pull it out too hard, not to be able to snap it, not being able to overstretch it or cause any other type of tension on that line or even the electrical components. They're really familiar with that type of installation. Someone who's not familiar, you may think, oh, I can move out my refrigerator 2 feet and then I'll be able to have plenty of room to get back there. You move it out and then you just hear like a slight pop and, water spurting.
Then you created the problem.
You've created a problem that may not have been a problem. And that's because, hey, that water line's not going to go 2 feet, that type of situation.
So there are people you can call. It just wouldn't be a plumber?
Yes. No, so plumber, that's what a lot of people call and ask me on. They're like, well, who do I get to really tackle this problem? Your HVAC people, so your air conditioning and heaters, they're the ones that know the inside and outs of your furnaces, your AC units, your condenser lines. Let them be the ones that crawl up in your crawl spaces and do a check on that. There are appliance servicemen and appliance repair people that are very good in all aspects of appliances. The washer and dryers, the dishwashers, refrigerators, they install them, they fix them when they break down, but they can also service them. So a supply line check real quick would not be too much for them. Your HVAC people, going back to it, can also do what they call as a duct cleaning. That vent that goes from your dryer to your outside, it's very important to make sure that's cleaned also. The debris that is caught within that vent can literally lead to a house fire. It's a very, very common area of a fire risk. So having the HVAC guy come out, check all your service lines, clean your dryer vent, it's a great service for them and you're protecting your home. And then it's great to document as a homeowner with your insurance and everything like that. Hey, I had a professional licensed technician come out and they service this, and this, making sure that you're showing your ownership responsibility of, I'm taking care of my home.
So it sounds like probably two types of technicians to thoroughly check your house, an appliance person. So what would someone Google to find this person to check the appliances?
Appliance repair.
Appliance repair.
Home simple. Appliance repair, home appliance servicing, and they're a great one. Another person to really talk to a lot of times is going to be also your HVAC or your plumber, because of how much interconnection they have in their industries. They normally know, like, hey, if your washer's going out, I have a really great guy. He's done a lot of work with me, and he knows Samsung's like the back of their head, or, LG's, and he can come out and take a troubleshoot. Your local plumber and HVAC guy usually live within their industry and know the people that can help them out. The reason is those guys are also going to be the ones referring them work in response of like, hey, we checked the supply line. It's not the supply line. It's the actual, or the condenser line. It's the pipe that's running to the refrigerator. They need a good plumber. When we're investigating where water's coming from and we're looking at the true source, is it at the wall or behind the wall, or is it on the appliance? So what we really tell people, and what I recommend doing for a homeowner, is the component is mainly know your vulnerability spots. All of your appliance, you could just put that as one category. Underneath your sinks, you should always be able to take a look underneath your sink. A lot of people use it for a lot of different storage reasons. I highly recommend that if you are doing that, you still keep clear the piping area right underneath the sink, so you're able to see if there's a slow drip, if the drain starts to clog, the faucet starts to leak, or anything like that, that it's not cluttered with stuff to the point where you can't open up your closet or your cupboards and say, yep, we're clean, we're dry, we're good to go. So making sure that that's not so condensed with your cleansers, your makeup, I have 2 teenage girls, so I have a lot of makeup underneath our bathroom seats in a bathroom. But we even stopped and said, hey guys, mom needs to be able to come in and check and make sure everything's good. And so we reorganized it. A lot more peace of mind knowing that we don't have a water leak.
I've walked into homes before and you get this musty kind of a smell I mean, other than touching for water, I'm assuming that's what you do, or visually
Mhm.
looking for water. What about smell?
Smell is a big indicator. And while we do touch and look for water and we do smell, smell is not an indicator really for water, but smell is the indicator for microgrowth. If you're walking in and it's musty and it hits you that big of an impact, you probably have microgrowth somewhere within the home. I don't want to do scare tactics and tell people, oh, it's super dangerous or anything like that, where people start to have a panic. It is definitely something though you need to be worried about and know it will not go away on its own. If you walk in and you smell musty, or you're constantly having and maybe allergies, bad sinus headaches, nosebleeds, migraines, there could be mildew. It may not necessarily be mold, but still considered a microgrowth. But it affecting the actual smell of the house and the environment, that means it's probably in more than one small area. That means it's probably in multiple rooms. 9 times out of 10, what we're going to look at and want to look at is also we are going to look at the attic area, the crawl space, because usually it's somewhere towards the HVAC systems and the AC lines, water coming in, or even a possible roof leak that it didn't fully penetrate the ceiling of a dwelling, but it stayed really moist and, in that environment, in the attic, and then possibly Southern California, you'll get a rainy day on Thursday, and then Friday we'll shoot back up to the 80s. So we have that prime environment to go from wet to growing very, very quickly. So musty does need to be investigated. Now, when we come out and any remediation company comes out, that is one of the first things that we do is when we enter is we take a deep breath, we take a smell.
If you faint, then you got mold.
I'm thinking
joking.
you have a carbon monoxide leak.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a leak, just possibly not mold if you're fainting that bad or that quick. But
Now, you say microgrowths, mold, mildew. Are there any other big names out there that would be defined as a microgrowth besides those two? And I know there's hundreds, if not thousands, of each of those, correct?
yeah. So the one that everyone's really afraid of, if you start going down the rabbit hole of Googling things, the term that is the most common as a scare one is the black mold. Everyone's like, oh, black mold, it'll kill you. It's toxic. If you have it in your home, we do tests for black mold.
Most molds, the color black.
No.
Oh, okay. But are there multiple molds that are
Yes.
black, but
Yes.
may not be the quote unquote black mold?
Black mold. Yes, sir. Our firm routinely and highly suggests that, hey, we have spores that are coming up. This is the protocol of how to safely remediate, but we would recommend you to get it tested to know exactly what type of spores you were working with. It for me and our team here, it's better to know and then to be able to move forward than to kind of do guesswork in the sense of it just assuming that it's the worst case scenario. A lot of times, molds can present different health problems to different people. The same spore could affect 4 different people in 4 different ways.
I was going to mention that. Not
Yeah.
everybody, because there's mold. I've had mold tests done on houses of clients, and it's interesting because what they'll do is they go to mostly, from my recollection, they check each room. And then they'll also check outside, and they check. And the reason they check outside, tell us why they check outside and inside for mold.
You're looking for your ambient, which is your, I guess you say this is what your typical environment looks like, your ambient spore count. That is what's in your everyday environment around the home. There's mold in your trees, your fertilizers, like we were saying at the beginning of the show. There's mold everywhere. So when you open up the garage door, you're opening up your front door and you're welcoming in the world. There are just spores that float around. But there's also allergens, dust, smoke, debris. There could be ash in the air. There could just be fine layers of the dirt that's coming in off the sidewalk or your plants. And that's why people sometimes say, like, oh, on a windy day, their allergies are going nuts. Or on a super sunny day, because more of the pollen's in the air, their allergies go nuts. Or you have someone who's like me, very mold sensitive. You go outside on a day after it rains, and I'm just like, oh, yeah, I can feel the spores. They're moving. They're in the wind. And you can feel because of the dampness and the moisture that, hey, things are in the air. So a good company, when they come out and test, they are going to take an outside air sample. They are going to understand what is common in that area. And in Orange County, you have a lot of different factors of what's common to your area. Are you close to a park, a school, or a wildlife sanctuary? I joke about it, but you have the wetlands. We've had calls that are right beside the wetlands for mold testing. People are getting sick and they wanted to make sure that it wasn't mold inside the home. And it found out that the person actually was allergic to the birds at the wetlands. So they will be moving. So any decent remediation company, what they're going to do is they're going to offer you mold testing. Good remediation companies will not do the testing themselves. They will have an independent lab, their technician come out. I will not, hands off, I don't touch the samples. They come, they gather up all the samples, air samples, swabs, outside, inside, but they also take a lot of different readings. They're going to know if it was a cloudy or sunny day. Was it raining the day before? Was there moisture or condensation on the house? Meaning, was there a high dew content for it? What was the temperature? Was there any wind? All of these environmental notations make a big impact on how your reading is going to come through. So the lab technicians will turn around and they'll gather all the samplings and they'll start with air and then they'll say, are there any in particular areas that you want us to swab? Technicians will ask this, like, are there your vulnerable points, like we've talked about, or maybe you noticed a staining and you want that staining to be identified, and they'll take swabs there. They're also going to take probably a swab of an area that isn't stained as a control factor, like this is A and B, and we're going to compare the two. And then they're going to ship it off to the lab, and then you'll probably get your results anywhere between 24 to 48 hours later. Doesn't take long. And the reports that you're going to see is going to be a breakdown of spores. It's going to show you exactly what was collected in what sample and where. It's also going to show you, hey, what's outside your home? And I find this really interesting because in different areas, you're going to have a higher pollen count, and that comes up on the test. You're going to have higher everything. So you may be reacting in your home, but it could be something completely environmental out of your home too. Then it'll go down and break down what spores were collected where, and also what type of spores. Now, we are not expecting anyone to be mold experts when they give the protocols. So they give the most common, where do you find this spore at? How does it relate to the human body? How may you be presenting? Is it dangerous? Is it not dangerous? And then your actual levels. If it's, you only have 1,000 spores, you're depending on what type of spore count, you're relatively safe. But if you're 50 to 60,000 spores, that means you have a pretty large colony, and it's the black mold colony and it's identifying it, then yes, you have black mold in your home and you need to have the proper remediation.
So is it fair to say that every house typically has some sort of mold? That's fair to say. The question is it A, dangerous, B, dangerous to you? It's also fair to say that some people aren't affected by mold, most molds. Is there a mold that everybody's affected by?
The black mold.
The black mold.
The black mold, and the reason the black mold is it has a very, very strong potency. So it will affect you. Now, the severity of how it affects you, there's a lot of factors there. Your own immune system, your health, your age, your diet, all of that plays a factor into the exposure of black mold. I did have one family. It was a family of 4, and they had black mold in multiple rooms. Athletic kids, very athletic mom, good diet, no severe medical conditions, no heart, no immune disease, no diabetes. But the kids were diagnosed with ADHD. And what she noticed is in the recent months, they had a lot more trouble with regulating their ADHD. It's been a lifelong condition they lived with. So they were very regulated in the sense of they knew kind of all of their mechanisms. And she was like, there's just something else that's going on. The son kept having reoccurring lung infection. The doctor recommended, hey, you should really have your house studied and do an environmental study. There's something that's triggering all the kids. Absolutely no visible mold growth when you walked into the house. So we did some moisture scanning. We found some vulnerable areas that were behind the drywall. And then we marked those areas and had the lab tested come and do swabs and air samples. And yes, without any visible growth outside of her drywall and outside of the plant, she had 4 different colonies of black mold, and all of the kids were reacting different.
4 different qualities of black mold. So black mold's the same type of mold, but it was just growing in 4 different places.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned ADHD issues with that. What are other common effects? Watery eyes, trouble breathing.
So I have the preference and I have to make sure it's kept in is I am not a doctor. I am not a medical professional. We definitely see mold reacting to people in the same families, but in different ways. I can give you some of the common symptoms that we see as remediation, and then you could Google what are also, signs of mold toxicity, and you're going to get different symptoms everywhere you go. But yes, the watery eyes, bloody nose, migraine, constant lung infections. You're also going to get hives and skin rashes. You can get everything from some immune compromised can actually have cases of pneumonia and stuff like that. So internally, it's a very hard substance for the body to break down and to fight against. But again, I'm not a medical professional, and I want to make sure that if you are having an ongoing health condition, you can ask your medical provider, hey, is mold something that I should be worried about? Could it be a factor of this? And the doctor can say, oh, no, this is not mold. Or no, this is because of A, B, and C. But a lot of times I do hear doctors say, no, your environment can definitely 100% affect your health. We cannot get over this step. Yes, please have an environmental study done. Let's see if you have a trigger there.
Are there any other environmental studies that you're talking about besides a mold detection company? I suppose. Is that what they're called? Mold detection companies?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I mean, a good remediation company can come in and do a property walk and let you know, hey, this is some areas that I would be really suspicious of. Let's go ahead and contact a company and get it tested. There are other factors inside older homes. You have asbestos, you have lead, you have your other allergens in regards to the fibers of your carpet, pet hair, dander, and then surrounding, hey, was anyone doing any type of big yard work or remodeling? 3 houses down to my own house, my neighbor did a big remodel. There was a lot of drywall dust that was up in the air. I was completely sensitive to just drywall dust. It had no mold or anything into it. And I ended up getting a lung infection myself. So it's all a really, what is your body exposed to that it is not normally exposed to and is having trouble adapting? So there are definitely people out there that can do environmental studies. There are going to be people that say they can do everything and all in one. And unless it's an actual environmental study group, that are specialized in their labs or breaking down the samples, that's who I would turn to first. And every great restoration company has at least 3 to 4 different environmental groups that they turn to pull in and say, hey, we need a study on this particular property. We're going to go out and do an inspection. And they're happy to help.